Hey everybody, my name is Kaylani and welcome back to my book corner. Today we are going to be talking about the books I read in March. And let me tell y'all, March was a stressful month for me from reading and other things. March was a month of many things in the world, and I think the stress got to me a little bit. So we didn't have as good as a reading month as last month, but that's okay. We still read some books. We had a good time. Towards the end of the month as well, I kind of went into a little bit of a reading slump because that is when the world got to its potential worst right now. And I just couldn't get into a book. So we are going to go through the books that I read. I'm just going to go through them in the order I read them, and we will see what happens. Yeah. And then if you want some stats for this month, let me find my stat page. We read 17 books this month. 2 of them were Audible originals that I'm not going to talk about because, well, I'll tell you what they are, but I'm not going to talk about them like in depth because they're too short to really talk about. Like you get like maybe an hour to 2 hours of content, and I listen to it in like 45 minutes because I listen at a faster speed. So it's just not something that I don't even rate them. I just mark them as read. So I read 17 and listened to 17 books. 5 of them were Audible, 12 of them were physical, and I listened to 12 Audible hours. So it was kind of a low month for Audible for me this month. And then I read 4,635 pages. So it's not my worst month so far this year, but it hopefully won't be my best month either. Well, it can't be my best because last month so far is my best month. But that is the stats that we have for this month. We will go ahead and just jump right into the books. So the first book I read was a new release. It is Havenfall by Sarah Holland. I picked up this book specifically because of the cover and because it's like this head, and I just really love the design of it, and then all of the gold is also like a shiny gold. So this book is about a girl, and this girl has the ability to see creatures from other realms. And her summer vacation, she goes to this place where her uncle is in charge of the realms, and you can go through these like portal doors to the other realms. And their world is called Haven because they are the only realm that other people from other realms can stay at and not die, I think. And some things happen, and her uncle is taken out of commission, but he's still alive, and she has to then all of a sudden become the person in charge of Havenfall, and I gave it a 3-star. I enjoyed it for the most part. The main character hates herself pretty much and has no idea of her self-confidence and is a little annoying at times about it. She constantly complains about how she doesn't know what the right decision to make was, and she puts her trust in all of the wrong people, and that definitely affected my rating of it because I was just like, make a decision for yourself. Like, I know she's supposed to be 17, and I guess I will say that it was an accurate representation of a young person, I think, like the low confidence, not sure what decisions to make. So it was an accurate representation of a young person, but towards the end, she definitely comes into herself and she is able to make some correct decisions for Havenfall. So that is the first book I read this month, and it was a 3. The next thing I listened to was one of the Audible originals. It was Mind of Her Own, and it is about Marie Curie. And then the next thing I listened to was True West. That was also another Audible original, and the only reason I picked it is because it has Kit Harington as one of the voice actors, and so that's the only reason I picked it up. It was hard to listen to. I didn't necessarily enjoy it. Like I said, I'm not going to rate these because there's not enough to rate on, I think. The next book that I picked up was actually The Bone Witch, which I actually DNF'd this month, and I think it was because I just couldn't get into it. I don't think I was in the right mood for it. I am going to try picking it up again in a future date. So we will hopefully go back to that one. The next book that I read and finished was Lethal Game by Christine Feehan, and this follows our two main characters, Malachi and Amaryllis. And Malachi has suffered a trauma to one of his legs, and he is on like a mandatory vacation. And when he goes to his bed and breakfast, not the owner, but she's like, I guess the caretaker, Amaryllis, they meet, and she is also secretly a ghost walker, per usual, and it is their story, and there is definitely some like government conspiracy stuff like normal, and it was really good. It's not my favorite Christine Feehan Dark Hunter book, or not Dark Hunter, Ghost Walker book. Wrong series. Ghost Walker book that I had listened to, but I always love a Ghost Walker book. I did give it 4 stars because I always love the Ghost Walker books, even though they're the same book every time, but I can't get enough. So that was another book that I read this month. The next one that I picked up was the graphic novel Saga. It is the second novel in the series. I loved it just as much as the first, and there are some crazy things in these books. I am not going to show you because they are an SFW, and I wouldn't want to show just in case someone like someone who shouldn't click on this video clicked on this video. But this one follows the same family as they travel across space, and their enemies are getting closer and closer. And I highly recommend this if you are into space and family and crazy imagery. So that is another one that I read this month. This one I gave, I think, I gave it 5 stars. I thought I gave it a 4, but I gave it 5 stars. So there is that one. And the next book I read was Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Nig, and this was my favorite read for the month. This is the one that I took away from the month, and I was like, this is it. This follows an Asian American family. I think they're in the 70s. Yeah, in the 70s. And the oldest, or not the oldest, but the like treasured sister passes away from unexplainable circumstances. And it's kind of how the family reels from the loss, but it's so much more than that because it follows like the family from like birth, like the parents' birth until the moment where the sister dies, and then months after that. And it's such an interesting read about how the dynamics set themselves up to be where they were, because the parents' set up a dynamic for these parents, and these parents set up a dynamic for their children, and it's like multi-generational, and it was such a good read, and I feel like I have to pick up Little Fires Everywhere now. But this was my favorite book for the month, and the ending was just like everything that had set it up. Like the ending made sense, and it was just like, it gave me goosebumps, and I enjoyed it so much. So I highly recommend this if you're really into books about like familial ties and unexplained deaths, because that was the mystery of the whole book, was how did the sister die and why did she die. The next book we have is A Study in Scarlet Women, and this was an interesting read for me. I think I gave it 5 stars because of the ending, because the ending was like, what? I did not see that coming, and maybe I'm just bad at like mysteries, and so like that's why I didn't see it coming. But I enjoyed this. It is a Sherlock Holmes twist because the main character is a female. Her name is Charlotte Holmes, and she takes on the persona of Sherlock Holmes. And then Watson is this matron that she has that has kind of taken her in, because at the beginning of the book, Charlotte is kicked out of her home because she tries to sleep with a married man because she is trying to get her father to respect her. And so that makes sense, right? So she is kicked out of her home and is kind of just trying to discover a way to live her life the way she wants to, because it is set back in the time of Sherlock, and so there is the expectation that she is a woman and she should get married and she should have babies, and she's like, I don't want that. And so she takes her future into her own hands, and it's how she survives taking her future into her own hands. I definitely think it's an interesting twist on Sherlock, and if you're into murder mysteries, highly recommend. And the next book I read was The Wrath of the Dragon King, and this is the second trilogy, or the second series of the Fablehaven series. And this series is kind of rough for me because the first series I read, or I listened to, I should say, I listened to the whole series like back to back to back to back. And these series, it was all out at that time. And this series, first of all, isn't all out, so I can't listen to them back to back to back. And there is something different about this series. And I know a lot of people talk about like series that authors are then forced to write because their first series did well. And I don't know if that's what's going on with these or what's happening, but I'm not enjoying this set as much as I enjoyed Fablehaven. It's the Dragon Watch series, yeah. And I love Seth and Kendra, and I enjoy their characters in Fablehaven, but in this one, I don't know if it's because they're still kids, but they're definitely treated way more like adults in these ones, where I'm like, why are you putting all of this faith into these young people? But I don't know, I'm not enjoying these ones as much. And I read Fablehaven last year, so it's not like there's a big gap of age between when I read Fablehaven and when I read these, so I don't know. I only gave it a 3-star because I genuinely did enjoy it, and I don't know. And I can't really talk a lot about the books because if you haven't read Fablehaven, there's tons of spoilers in this, and if you haven't read the first book of this series, there's spoilers. So I'm not really going to talk about it except for Seth and Kendra get into their usual craziness, and there's dragons, and I don't know. It's kind of sad because I really want to like the series, and I'm going to try to continue with it because my dad also reads these series, so it's kind of like something we can talk about, but we'll see what happens. And then the next one I listened to was A Pinch of Magic, and this is about 3 sisters who are given magical items, and they find out that there is a curse on them where they cannot leave the island that they call home, and it is them trying to break the curse of their family so that they can leave the island. And I don't know, I gave it a 3-star. This wasn't one I picked up just on my own accord. It was with the Animal Crossing readathon. It was the bonus thing was to pick one of these 3 books that the host had picked, and this is the one I picked. And like I said, I listened to it on Audible too because I listened to it while I was on a trip, and I don't know, I enjoyed it, I guess, but it was definitely like middle grade, which isn't always bad because I do sometimes like middle grade. I believe Fablehaven is middle grade, so I like middle grade. I don't know, maybe it was just because, I don't know, maybe it was just the Audible. Maybe I just didn't enjoy the audio experience, but I gave that one a 3. And then the next book I read was the Woolly Hat Knitting Society, and I'm gonna say nah. So this book follows a woman who was just recently fired from her job, and her brother broke both of his wrists, and so she is moving in with her brother to help him live with 2 broken wrists. And he runs a knitting store, and I don't really remember much of it. It was not a good book. It was boring, and not in a good way. Like, it was boring, and it took forever, and it was all very predictable, and I was just like, why am I reading this? This should have been a DNF, but I was waiting for the romance to turn around, and I was like, this romance has got to get better, and then it just didn't, because there's like a friends to enemy thing, or a lover, or enemies to lover thing, and the old nemesis from her job, she finds out it's like this actually great guy, and then it's a romance, and it just wasn't good. I like the meaning behind it though, because the meaning was, or like the idea behind it is they are knitting all these hats for preemie babies because so many preemie babies are born every day and they don't have clothes and they don't have hats because all the baby clothes are too big for them, and it's just like this nice thing that they can do for preemies because her friend had a preemie baby and they had knitted the hat for him, and it was this whole thing. So I guess for that it was okay, but nothing else I felt like was good about this book, and I wish it had been better because it was like one of the first books that I had marked on Goodreads that I wanted to read. But the first book is the next book I read. The first book I marked on Goodreads was the next book I read, and that was The Sing-Along Society for Singletons. And let me tell you, that one was worse. So this I gave 1 star. And like I said, I like the concept of it. It is about a group of women who start a society, or like a sing-along thing, where they go to this house every weekend and they watch musicals. What's wrong with that? But the way it was done, you only experience the characters that night. So like from information to information, every character changed, or like every Friday night, like information changed, and they had to recap the whole week. And then you had that night. And I was like, why not just show us the week? Why not show us? Why just tell us? So I had a little bit of a problem with that. It was also very predictable. Everything about it was predictable, even down to the lead, or the like main male character's background. I was like, duh, that's probably why he's like that. So I did not enjoy that one. Luckily, I read both of those I think they are only ebooks, so I read them both on my Kindle, so they were extremely cheap, so I didn't waste too much time on them, or too much money on them. I maybe spent a little bit too much time on them, but we will move on. And the next book I read was Wicked As You Wish by Ren Chupeco, which is so weird because I put down The Bone Witch by Ren Chupeco, so why would I pick up Wicked As You Wish by Ren Chupeco? This is a drastically different book to me than The Bone Witch. This is written, I feel like, completely differently. Maybe I just didn't get enough into The Bone Witch to like be able to compare it, but I like this one so much more. I gave it a 3 star, which isn't like the best rating, but it was a good book, and I enjoyed the adventure they went on, and I don't know, I enjoyed this one so much more. It wasn't what I expected, because in the synopsis they say they're in Arizona and a phoenix shows up, so they have to go back to Avalon. And for some reason in my head I thought that was 2 different like worlds, like Avalon was a completely different world. But she pretty much rewrote history to make this new country into existence, which was like, how can you do that? That was so amazing. And then she is Filipino, I believe. That is where she is from. Yeah, she is Filipino, and there's a lot of Filipino things in there. Like I think a lot of the food references are Filipino, and I enjoyed experiencing that. It is not like Filipino in like the aspect of like everything is from the Philippines, but there's definitely like Filipino accents. And I think it was just really well done. Like the way she rewrote history, and the way she tied in like every country. Like America was a big one because it started in Arizona, and she rewrote the history of the United States so that Avalon was part of the history, and it was really well done. So Wicked As You Wish by Ren Chupeco was a good read. Like I said, I only gave it 3 stars because it is kind of dense. It's a big one. But I am ready for the next book. I am excited for the next one. I gotta wait a whole nother year for it according to Goodreads, but there's that one. So the next one we have is The Jet Setters by Amanda Ward, and this one follows a older woman, Charlotte. I believe she's in her 80s, and her 3 grown children, and she wins a contest called The Jet Setters, and they get to go on a cruise across Europe. And every character is so unique in this. Like Charlotte is an older woman who had an abusive mother, and she struggles with that. Her husband was extremely abusive, and that plays into all 4 of the characters. And I really enjoyed it. The 3 children, there is an older sister, a middle brother, and a younger sister. I can never remember the names of them because they're like weird. Like Cord is the brother's name, and then yeah, it doesn't tell me in there. So like Cord is the brother's name, and Cord is closeted gay to his family, and he has to deal with the fact that his mother doesn't know that he's gay, even though he is engaged to a man. And then we have the oldest sister who tried to be a movie star, and she failed at being a movie star, and her movie star significant other has left her. And at the beginning of the book, she finds out she's pregnant, and it's just wow. And then the youngest sister was like the one to watch out for, though. Her husband is kind of emotionally abusive like her father was, and he is trying to manipulate her into staying with him. And so she has set it upon herself to try to get out of this relationship. And the way she does it is amazing. I'm not going to spoil it because I don't want, like, it is like one of the things at the very end of the book you find out. Or find out how she has gotten to the point where her relationship is ending. And it was a good book. So highly recommend The Jet Setters if you're really into like familial ties. I guess that's kind of my thing because my two of my favorite books this month were about families. So that is something I learned this month. And then the last book that I finished in the month of March was The Cruel Prince. What? Where have I been on this? The Cruel Prince was probably my favorite fantasy read for the month. I read it in a day and I am so excited. I discovered it. Cardan is my child. I know he's a bad person, but I love him so much. And Jude and her sister kind of annoy me, but that's okay. We're moving past it for Cardan. And I've already ordered the next two books because I want to read more about what happens. So in this one, we follow Jude, who has been taken hostage by a fairy and taken to the fairy realm with her twin sister and older half-sister, who is also part fairy or part fae. And it is how she navigates the hierarchy of the fae world and how she is becoming the hero of her dreams. So that is the last book I read this month. I gave it 4 stars and I enjoyed it. And then I started The Good Neighborhood this month. Sorry, I have a little bit of the hiccups. The Good Neighborhood, and I'm not that far into it. Like I said, I kind of went into a reading slump toward the end. And so like just picking up a book has been hard for me. I am taking a break from this book, so we will see if I go back to it. I needed to pick up a read I knew I liked. So I picked up Miss Peregrine's and we will be reading that at the beginning of April. But hopefully I will be able to get back into this and it will be in my wrap up for this month. But that is all I have for you. We read quite a few books, even though I feel like I was unsuccessful. I did take part in 2 readathons this month. I took part in the Sherlockathon, which is a Sherlock-based readathon, and then I also took part in the Animal Crossing readathon, which I have yet to get Animal Crossing. It's downloading on my Switch now, though. But yeah, that is all I have for you, and I hope you're having a great day. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we will see you next time. Bye!